some pretty good vibes coming out of Russia.
Now on Watching Washington, the U.S. joins peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. Is a breakthrough finally in sight?
Plus, why the U.S. has been put on a human rights watch list. The controversy unfolding now.
And a high-stakes mission in space. Astronauts stranded, now being rescued. Those stories and more straight ahead. Good evening and welcome to Watching Washington. I'm Sam Frank.
And I'm Sophie McLaughlin. Here's a look at what's making headlines this past week. The Senate is set to vote today on President Trump's government funding bill. The bill has already passed through the House, and it now needs Senate Democrats to vote with Republicans, as they do not currently have enough votes to pass the bill. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer announced that he will vote to keep the government open.
I believe it is my job to make the best choice for the country, to minimize the harms to the American people. Therefore, I will vote to keep the government open and not shut it down. There is nobody in the world, nobody, who wants to shut the government down more than Donald Trump and more than Elon Musk. We should not give it to them. And make no mistake, Democrats will continue to fight what Donald Trump is doing.
It is still unclear whether or not the bill will pass. Senate Democrats face a tough decision: support the Republican-led bill or oppose it and force a government shutdown.
The U.S. and Ukraine met in Saudi Arabia Tuesday to continue discussions of a ceasefire with Russia. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz represented the United States in the talks. The Ukrainians agreed to a 30-day ceasefire with Russia, and in exchange for the U.S.'s offer to resume providing military aid to Ukraine. The U.S. now looks to talk with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The New York Times has reported that Putin has some demands of Ukraine before accepting a ceasefire, which include NATO denying Ukraine membership despite winning military aid from the United States. President Zelensky stated that Ukraine is prioritizing peace with Russia.
Сьогодні увесь день на різних рівнях.
Today, the most intensive work ever has been going on all day with President Trump's team at various levels. Many calls. The topic is clear: peace as soon as possible, security as reliably as possible. Ukraine is as constructively oriented as possible.
Amid discussions of peace, the two sides also stated that it will resume discussions of a minerals deal, which would give the United States access to Ukraine's rare minerals.
On Monday, March 10th, the United States was added to the Civicus Monitor watch list due to threats to civic freedoms under the Trump administration. According to the Civicus press release, the civic freedom status of the United States is now listed as narrow, which means that people in the country are allowed to exercise civic freedoms, including the freedoms of association, peaceful assembly, and expression, but occasionally violations of these rights take place.
President Trump's executive orders, which are unraveling democratic institutions, are the most concerning. The press release even compares Trump to mass firings of federal workers to the days of McCarthyism. Europe is responding to President Trump's new tariffs on steel and aluminum. On the list, boats, bourbon, and motorcycles. President Trump officially increased tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports to 25% on Wednesday, promising they would help create U.S. factory jobs at a time when his seesawing tariff threats are jolting the stock market and raising fears of an economic slowdown, increased inflation, and even a global trade war. The European Union responded to the tariffs with countermeasures up to $28 billion worth of American exports. Canada also plans to announce nearly $21 billion in retaliatory tariffs in response to the U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs. A senior Canadian government official said Wednesday, EU leaders called the tariffs by America unjustified and say the countermeasures will be swift and proportionate, expected to begin April 1st. NASA's SpaceX Crew 10 mission lifted off Wednesday, sending 4 astronauts to the International Space Station. Their arrival will also mark the long-awaited return of astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore, who have been stranded aboard the ISS for 9 months. Williams and Wilmore launched last June on Boeing's Starliner for a short test mission, but technical issues caused delays. Now, They'll return home aboard a SpaceX Dragon capsule alongside two Crew 9 astronauts.
The delay has sparked political controversy, with Elon Musk and former President Trump suggesting, without evidence, that the Biden administration intentionally delayed their return. NASA has denied these claims, stating safety and logistics were the primary factors. While an exact return date isn't set, Crew 10 is scheduled to launch from Kennedy Space Center Wednesday at 7:48 p.m. Eastern, with docking at the ISS early Thursday morning. The handover process will take several days before Williams and Wilmore can return home. Canada is getting a new Prime Minister. Former central bank governor Mark Carney has been elected as the head of the Liberal Party and will soon replace Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister. Trudeau resigned amid falling poll numbers and pressure from within his own party. His exit comes as Canada faces a trade war with the U.S., launched by President Trump.
And is rightly retaliating with our own tariffs that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here in Canada. And my government will keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect.
Carney won nearly 86% of the party vote and promised to strengthen Canada's economy. He has vowed to keep retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. until, in his own words, Americans show us respect. His leadership could shift U.S.-Canada relations as he supports a stronger economic stance against Trump's policies. Experts say his decisions will shape the future of trade and diplomacy between the two countries.
Up next, layoffs hit the Department of Education, what this means for workers in the industry.
Plus, say goodbye to free bags. Southwest Airlines is making a big change for travelers. Stay with us. More Watching Washington next.
Being involved in the 3-year program at Purdue made it easier to say to myself I could get done in 3 years. The 3-year program helped save me a ton of money. Not completing my 4th year, I would save around $30,000. It will give you an advantage, if anything. Doing the 3-year program at Purdue has shown me that I have motivation to do whatever it takes to get my degree.
Hi there, my name is Vikram Jaithlak and I'm the founder and president of the Purdue chapter of the University Blood Initiative. Over the past 2 years, we've been able to collect over 300 pints of blood to be donated to local hospitals, and you can be the next one to help out.
I donate my blood at the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
Right, I donated my blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
And I donated my blood at University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
Are you looking for a new hobby?
Or do you want to have a fun evening with your friends?
Then come climb to new heights at the Co-Rec Climbing Wall.
Independence became a central theme in Greenland's preliminary elections on Tuesday. Greenlanders largely voted for a future that does not involve the United States or U.S. President Donald Trump. Greenland's pro-business opposition party won virtually 30% of the vote, favors in a gradual path to independence from Denmark, and strongly pro-independence lawmakers doubled their representation.
The Education Department laid off over 1,300 of its employees as part of an effort to halve the organization's staff. Department officials announced the cuts Tuesday, raising questions about the agency's ability to continue usual operations. The Trump administration has already been whittling the agency's staff, though buyout offers and the termination of probationary employees. The layoffs are part of a downsizing effort directed by Trump as he moves to reduce the footprint of the federal government. Thousands of jobs are expected to be cut across the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Social Security Administration, and other agencies.
Southwest Airlines is making a big change that could affect how you pack for your next trip. Southwest Airlines is ending one of its biggest perks, free checked bags. The airline announced that starting Tuesday, May 28th, passengers will have to pay for their first and second checked bags, marking a major shift in the company's long-standing policy. A-list loyalty members and business fare passengers will still be able to check their bags for free. This move comes as Southwest faces pressure to improve its profits and shake up its operations. It also follows Elliott Investment Management's $1.9 billion stake in the airline last year, increasing calls for leadership changes and strategic overhaul.
U.S. inflation slowed last month for the first time since September, and a measure of underlying inflation fell to a 4-year low, even as widespread tariffs threaten to send prices higher. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Consumer Price Index rose 2.8% over the 12-month period ending in February, a drop from 3% in January. Economists say lower gas and grocery prices were key factors in cooling inflation, but other costs remain stubbornly high, including rent, housing, and auto insurance, which continue to climb. Despite the short-term relief, analysts warn that the Trump administration's new trade tariffs could reverse these gains. On Tuesday, the Federal Reserve noted the slower inflation rate, but warned that new trade policies could create economic uncertainty. Experts say the next few months will determine whether inflation continues to ease or spikes again, depending on consumer demand, supply chains, and trade policy shifts. As businesses and consumers adjust to higher import costs, many are bracing for potential price increases in mid-2025.
Joining us in the studio this week is Purdue's very own Professor Barrett Caldwell, here to talk to us about a recent surge in aviation crashes and what could potentially be the cause.
The full interview just ahead on Watching Washington.
I'm Rachel. I'm 19 years old. I'm a sophomore in computer engineering here at Purdue, and I'm the president of DAO. So DAO stands for Dance All Out, and it's kind of like a community where all dancers of different skill levels and artists have a space to express themselves and be artists and perform. We perform at things like the AAA Night Market and the VA, the Variation Showcase, at the end of the semester. We even had our own showcase last year, and that was really exciting. DAO not only offers like weekly classes and performance opportunities, but kind of like a really strong community / family to do it with. When people talk about college, or when you see in like coming of age movies, it's all about like the main character finding like the place where they belong, whether it's in school or like extracurricular or like with their friends or another hobby. But like this could be the place where you find like your coming of age moment, and like it could be the place where you discover like a big part of your life.
We have a special guest with us this week, Purdue Professor Barrett Caldwell.
Let's go now to Watching Washington's Haven Midkiff, who is standing by with this week's interview.
So today we have with us Barrett Caldwell, who is a professor at Purdue University. He teaches industrial engineering and aeronautics and astronautics, and he's also director of the NASA Indiana Space Consortium. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks a lot for helping me.
All right, so just jumping right into the questions, what factors do you believe are contributing to the recent surge in plane accidents?
Well, that's a really tough question. I think that, one of the things that we're seeing is a significant increase in aircraft traffic and the entrance of new types of aircraft. We've always had, both commercial aircraft and military craft and private pilots in general aviation, but we're also starting to see additional unpiloted or remotely piloted aircraft. People think of them as drones, and new entrants that are drastically increasing the amount of traffic that we have in the airspace. And that type of increase in traffic makes the air traffic system more brittle and more subject to accidents or incidents unless everything goes right, and it's really hard to make everything go right all the time.
So to what extent do you think human error could be a cause in these incidents?
Well, I know human error is a very common category that's used, but usually human error, when it's used as a definition, is usually some sort of blame on the pilot, where really we should be talking about system vulnerabilities, all the way from the design phase and what capabilities were designed into the automation that the pilot is using, and what are the interfaces between the pilot and the aircraft, and how that influences the ability of the pilot to make good decisions and execute the task that they need to execute.
So I know that you mentioned that air traffic congestion is one of the factors that you think is contributing to the surge in plane accidents. And then there was the recent crash at DCA that I know you've talked about in your classes before. Do you think a lot of people have said that air traffic congestion was one of the causes of that? Do you know if there's any other factors that might contribute to that incident?
I was reading about this just last night. The National Traffic Safety Board is still investigating causes, but we're seeing that especially at Washington National Airport, you've got very, very narrow corridors where aircraft can take off and land because of the monuments and all the sensitive airspace in the region. But then you also have the consideration of military helicopters very, very close. Just across the river from National is an area where military helicopters are taking off and landing. And that sort of close proximity between the helicopter flight paths and the aircraft flight paths is a really, really dangerous mix.
So do you see any other patterns or common causes with these incidents, or do you think that largely they're just unrelated and that the air congestion is one of like the top factors, or do you think there's any other like patterns among these?
Well, one of the challenges that we're having, and I know that one of the elements that we saw in the DCA accident is whether or not everybody is keeping to their location. There's a challenge of not just knowing where all the aircraft are, but what their intention is. And there does seem to be a concern about understanding what was the military aircraft, the Black Hawk helicopters, understanding of the intention of both the other aircraft, but also the messages that were being given by air traffic control. And there's even a question of how much of those messages did the Black Hawk pilot actually hear, because you've got multiple people trying to speak on the common channels, and whether or not even the messages are fully heard, because when you have one person talking, you won't hear the other communications that are trying to come in. So both the congestion, just in terms of more aircraft in the same space, if more people are using the communication channels, you will have these concerns of what's called step-ons, where one person speaking will make it so that the channel won't allow other messages to be heard, even if someone is trying to speak at the same time. So that's another time where the congestion and the increased traffic can make it challenging. And just the ability to understand what we'll call aircraft intent or pilot intent. Just because you see an aircraft at a certain location, you don't necessarily know what they're doing. And so if you see someone that is coming onto a runway, are they actually trying to take off, or are they just trying to cross the runway to get go further on their taxiway? And pilots are trying to make sense of that all the time. And air traffic controllers are trying to make sense of that all the time. One of the additional concerns is, in addition to the intent of all of the human pilots, if you've got an automated aircraft, it's much more difficult to figure out what that vehicle's intent is, because we know that it's not going to be performing exactly the way a human pilot would. So trying to understand what is going on and what is just not just the current state, but the projection into the future of what the other aircraft and what the controllers are trying to have the aircraft do becomes a really, really important problem to try to address. That is something that we've worked on in some of our research with the FAA, but also trying to understand as we have more and more information available, that doesn't mean that pilots are able to effectively make sense of or use all of that information. So trying to recognize, oh, I see that there's this weather factor or this storm, but trying to understand what the pilot wants to do with that information becomes another very big challenge.
All right. So I know there's been a lot of studies, a lot of cases done trying to figure out why there's been such a surge in these aircraft accidents. Do you think that climate or extreme weather conditions could be playing a role, or do you think that's just something that they've dealt with before and aren't really causing this surge?
Well, I would probably push back on two things. One is a surge in accidents when you have a very, very safe system in general. And in fact, before the DCA accident, there was basically maybe 2 decades in which there were no fatal accidents involving an American commercial jet. Now, I'm not, of course, any accident is too many, and the DCA accident was especially tragic because it's something that we hadn't seen in a very long time. There was, again, another accident in Toronto that did not end up with fatalities. And what we're seeing on the commercial side is increasing near misses. I'm much more concerned about the near misses because a near miss often involves the conditions are ripe, right? A lot of the holes and dice have lined up for an adverse event. But then again, in the human error discussion, we don't talk about the human catches. So a near miss where, oh, there was almost a problem, but a pilot or an air traffic controller recognized it and made a great save at the end so that there was not an actual incident. That's the indication that we really should be looking at. I think that, you know, a surge in accidents, if you go from 0 to 3, right, in a year, that's a surge in the sense that it's more than 0. It's when you look at the millions of flights that happen on the commercial side, it's still a very, very safe overall transportation network. Two concerns, as I said, the near misses are what concern me because those are where we're seeing the vulnerabilities in the system. And then the accident versus the near miss is whether or not we actually got lucky or someone was able to make that last good catch to keep the near miss from turning into an incident. And so I want to be careful before saying that everything is in a complete sense of disarray because of recent accidents. There's a lot of different factors there. Extreme weather will affect some incidents, and I do know that is a larger concern in the general aviation private pilot realm or special types of operations like helicopter search and rescue. Extreme weather can have a greater effect there, partially because of the ways those aircraft are equipped and partially because of the training of the pilots. I don't know if we know enough to really evaluate the role of extreme weather because obviously if a pilot chooses not to fly into an area where there's extreme weather, then we don't collect that data, right? There's no accident and there's no awareness, oh, that was a problem. But some of these incidents are cases where there were aspects of turbulence or other wind effects that we may not have been able to detect with the weather instruments that we have.
And so from a human factors perspective, what improvements in training, regulations, or technology could overall enhance this aviation safety?
That's a great question. So, the sort of old-fashioned approach to human factors was what we would call blame and train, and that's that idea of you find out human error. How did the pilot make a mistake? And that's the person to blame, and then we train all the pilots so that they don't make that mistake again. Well, unfortunately, that means, well, they might make a different mistake, or you're not looking at the way that their training helps them to do a very good job in a lot of other circumstances. So we really have to be able to understand not just the ways that pilots perform when everything is going well, but how do pilots manage to make recoveries? How do controllers manage to recognize adverse incidents so that members of the air traffic and airspace aircraft community can recognize these situations and respond to them in an effective way? So really the training, which we call in the human factors field situation awareness, how do we help pilots recognize what are the current situations, what are the current elements of the environment, and how do we respond to those effectively? And how do we troubleshoot when there is something that is not the way we want it? How do we recognize a potential near miss or a potential adverse incident and be able to recover from that? Some of that can be fixed by automation, but unfortunately, one of the challenges of automation is automation will do what it's been programmed to do, whether or not that's what you wanted it to do. So some of the challenges of autopilot or autopilot pilot transitions or handovers are problems where the automation and the pilot are wrestling for control. And that's one case that we really don't want to have happen. We want it to be so that the partnership between the aircraft automation and the pilot are working together. They're not working at cross purposes, so that the automation is doing its job well, and the automation is helping the pilot do his or her job.
Well, thank you. That's all that we have for today. So thank you for watching, and join us next week for more Watching Washington.